Ladies and gentlemen, I got a confession to make. I'm a massive Man United fan, as some of you guys may know. Have been for as long as I can remember. My dad passed it on to me. He was a supporter in the 80s. I'm talking Brian Robson, Mark Hughes, Ron Atkinson, the crew. And it's been passed on to me, like I said. And since then, I've been United through and through. And of course, I hold the tribalistic rivalries very close. So a team like Manchester City, I'm going to come out and say it. From a purely tribalistic point of view, I can't stand them. I can't stand them. But like I said, I got a confession to make. I can't help but love watching Kevin De Bruyne play football. Oh my God, guys. I think he's brilliant. And I've been of this opinion for a long, long time. Go through my tweets, go through the tape of me speaking about him in the past. I think he's amazing. I think, honestly, he is one of the supreme talents from midfield of the modern game. Not just in the Premier League history, not just of his generation, but I truly think in the modern game, Kevin De Bruyne sits in terms of ability almost up there with the best. I think he's that good. However, there's always been one thing about Kevin De Bruyne that leaves me wanting more, to be honest with you. And that's his performances at the international stage. When you look at the best players ever, right? The best midfielders, for example, as well, too. Some of them may not have the most consistent club resumes. If you look through their 38-game season, they might not have performed well on match day 20 against Levante or match day 32 against Sassuolo. Even in the Champions League, they may not be the most consistent at that stage. But I think almost every single all-time great player ever in this sport has some kind of international resume. Zidane. A criticism we often hear from today's fans is that if you actually break down his club resume, he wasn't always the most consistent. But I'll tell you what, when Zidane showed up at major international tournaments, he almost always put on a show. 98 World Cup, the 2000 Euros, the 2006 World Cup. Those are moments and campaigns as a whole that Zidane lit up and made his own. You look at a guy like, I don't know, Maradona. Maradona, okay, you know what? I'm not going to say he doesn't have any club resume. What he did for Boca Juniors, what he did for Napoli as well, two massive, massive accomplishments. But let's be real. When we talk about Maradona, we're talking about the 1986 World Cup above all. Above all, that's his pièce de résistance, if you want to call it that. We remember what he did to England. We remember what he did to Belgium. That World Cup is almost universally regarded as Maradona's tournament. The list goes on and on. Even Messi, for God's sake, a guy who's completed the game. Even his biggest doubters, once he won that World Cup, had to hold their hands up and say, look, there's nothing else I can say anymore. The old gen who used to always talk about Maradona and Pele, and they did it for their country and they did it on the international stage. Once Messi won that World Cup, you never heard from them again. Now, Kevin De Bruyne, I don't want to sit here and say he's never done anything for Belgium because that would be disingenuous. He's had his moments. Knocked out Brazil in 2018. Terrific strike. I remember in 2014 against the US. He's had other moments as well, too. I would never say Kevin De Bruyne has never showed up for Belgium. But I do believe that he showed up for them in moments. When it comes to really having that one international tournament that he made his own, I do think that he is missing that. And for me, the only reason I even bring it up is, again, because I do believe that Kevin De Bruyne, in terms of a talent, sits at the all-timer status. I'm not saying he's as good as Maradona or whatever, but when we talk about midfielders, he is, for me, at the level, talent-wise, as the best ever. So why isn't he regarded as such? You could say a numerous amount of reasons. Maybe the fact that he plays for City, the fact that his game isn't the most aesthetically pleasing to everybody. But I truly believe as well, too, that a lot of people really do take international tournaments and international prestige. They rate it very, very highly. They regard it very, very highly. And for me, that lack of a vintage tournament for Kevin De Bruyne has always been something that has stuck with me. And again, this is coming from a massive, massive Kevin De Bruyne fan. And it's also stuck with me, right? Because I always say about international football, I've said it a million times now, it almost tends to favor individuals because international football, let's keep it real. There aren't the tactical restraints that you get at club football. There aren't the precise tactical instructions from coaches on a player dictating how you play at times. Which is why I kind of look at Kevin De Bruyne and think, actually, the international stage is really where we know you're great for City. I almost expect you to replicate those levels or even take it another level above, because I regard Kevin De Bruyne as such a brilliant individual, somebody who can pick up the ball and carry it forward, drive past players, create a chance out of nothing. You look at the pass that he played the other day against Romania to Romelu Lukaku, and we know it's offside. But that kind of pass, you can name the amount of people that play that pass to the regularity of Kevin De Bruyne on one hand. On one hand. He's one of them. So I look at the international stage and I've always thought this is a stage that Kevin De Bruyne should be one of the premier players at. Every single tournament we go into, De Bruyne should be somebody that's challenging for player of the tournament honors, or somebody that we leave these tournaments thinking, wow, De Bruyne, I can't think of this tournament again without thinking of De Bruyne. And to be honest, I've never really exited a tournament thinking it was De Bruyne's tournament. And look, let me make this very clear. I'm not asking for De Bruyne to win Belgium the Euros here. I'm not deluded. I look at the team that he has. I know this isn't basketball. One player in basketball, it's a 5v5 sport, can directly impact the result. In football, it's an 11-man sport. So De Bruyne could play the best game of his life, and if the other 10 guys around him aren't carrying their weight at least to a respectable amount, it could mean absolutely nothing. So let me be very clear here in what I'm saying. I'm not expecting Kevin De Bruyne to win Belgium the Euros. I'm not even expecting him to get to the final, maybe even not the semifinal. But my challenge to Kevin De Bruyne is to make his mark on this tournament and make it a vintage international tournament on his resume. Again, I'm not asking him to win it, but I look at in the past, James Rodriguez. He didn't win the World Cup in 2014. Didn't even make it past the quarterfinal. You can't think of that 2014 World Cup without thinking of James Rodriguez. You look at the 2010 World Cup. Didn't win it, but who's the first person that comes to mind when you think of the 2010 World Cup? You think of Diego Forlan. You think of the 2006 World Cup. Zidane was the best player at that tournament. But I'll tell you what, Andrea Pirlo had an incredible tournament. And he did it again in 2012. Didn't win it, got thrashed in the final because his team just ultimately wasn't good enough. But Andrea Pirlo, that was a vintage international campaign for Andrea Pirlo. I think you look at most of the so-called big, greatest of all-time midfielders, the Xavis, the Iniestas, the Luka Modric's, the Zidanes, they all have a tournament like that on the international stage on their resume. 2018, for example, De Bruyne's own teammate, Eden Hazard, marked that tournament. Marked it. It was his tournament. And I'm not saying he has to be the best player at the tournament, but you have to be one of them. 2018, Pogba, that was his tournament. Hazard, it was his tournament. Modric, it was his tournament. So I'm not saying De Bruyne has to win player of the tournament. I'm not saying he has to win the whole tournament itself. But I want to see Kevin De Bruyne. I want him to exit this tournament whenever he does, being able to look at himself in the mirror and for everybody to look at his performances and say, damn it, Belgium went out. But it wasn't for a lack of incredible performance and incredible effort from Kevin De Bruyne. One of the only times I've ever criticized De Bruyne at all. I'm telling you, if you don't believe me, check the tape, check the tweets. I've been very consistent about this. I'm a big fan of him. But the only time I've ever really been disappointed in him was last World Cup when he came out and said, we're too old. And again, that's not me saying he was wrong when he said that. Belgium was an aging team. Belgium was a team on decline, and ultimately it showed in their performances. But we aren't trying to hear that from you, bro. We're not trying to hear that Belgium are too old from the best player on the team. And I think the way that he's stepped up these first two games, at the time of recording, Belgium have played two games. They've won one, they've lost one. But honestly, Kevin De Bruyne has been, in my opinion, brilliant. Brilliant. The first game, I thought he was brilliant. If Romelu Lukaku has any shame in that game, Belgium win that game, and everybody's talking about Kevin De Bruyne. Everybody. He was brilliant. The second game, he has the result and also the goal to kind of back up his claim to being brilliant. But De Bruyne was brilliant against Romania. Again, showing all the reasons why I like him so much as a player. Brave, direct, fast, adventurous, playing killer balls, getting himself into goal-scoring positions, being relentless. That's all I'm asking from Kevin De Bruyne. I'm not asking him, again, to win the tournament. But make it your own. Make it your own. I think you're too brilliant of a player to retire at the end of your career and look back and be unable to say that I did everything at club level. I won the Champions League. I won the treble. I won numerous league titles. I smashed assist records everywhere I went. But at the international stage, maybe there's a bit more that I could have done. I think if De Bruyne were to retire today, he wouldn't be able to say he did everything he could. But I want at the end of this tournament, win or lose, for us to all be looking at Kevin De Bruyne and saying, wow, this guy right here, there's no doubt anymore. He might not be at the peak of his powers anymore. I don't think this is the best version of De Bruyne we'll ever see. But we look at the end of this tournament and say, wow, this is one of the all-time greats of the game. Because truthfully, I believe his talent level, it warrants that kind of talk. It warrants that kind of talk. And I think it would be a damn shame if Kevin De Bruyne is to bow out of his career without ever having that vintage tournament. So that's my challenge to Kevin De Bruyne. Make this one your own. And I wouldn't give you this challenge, or I'm sure he's not watching, but I wouldn't give Kevin De Bruyne this challenge if I didn't believe in my heart of hearts that he was fully capable of doing it. So, let's see what he's made of.